My movie is Dr. Friday, and it's this supernatural horror sci-fi movie that kind of takes a blend of a few different genres that I'm actually a huge Stephen King fan too. So it is a book that was a heavy influence on this. But it follows this teenage reporter who is investigating his town's disappearances, and its disappearances of black people specifically. The town has this history of a lot of like racism and hatred and bloodshed because of racism that existed in the community throughout its years of history. So now in this modern setting, a classmate of his, has actually disappeared. And he has gone on this investigation to find out who has done this and why they're doing this. Turns out there's kind of a supernatural twist to the story. A lot of the previous disappearances and stuff have been tied to the supernatural venom that's been feeding off of this bloodshed, and it's brewing within the town, supernatural venom of evil. And he eventually discovers that when it's kind of too late, when he actually gets some of this venom's powers, and he kind of has to use this venom against itself. So at the end of the movie, you'll see like he gets these like red eyes and stuff like that. But a lot of it is tied to this person who kind of brought this venom back. Her name is Daisy, who's kind of the muse, I guess, like femme fatale of the story. Somebody who you don't really expect to have done this, because in the beginning, you set up the story and it's like you see her with her bad relationship with her boyfriend and stuff like that. A lot of what she's doing, her motives are driven from the fact that she's been like denied a lot of opportunities in her own life. And so she's like trying to use that as leverage to bring the venom back for her own personal gain, so that she gets these supernatural abilities and is able to kind of take the town and use it as a means for vengeance. She thinks that that's what he wants too, but it's obviously not that. It's obviously like it's a bad thing. So, but yeah, so he's basically got to combat it. Thing is, I kind of want to build this story to be like a whole series. This is kind of like chapter 1, or more of an introduction to these accidental superheroes that exist not in just the world of Dr. Friday, but like a much bigger universe. I made like a web series last year called Eden, which takes place in a small town in California. And it follows like a girl who has teenage magic abilities. And she goes to this town, and there's this cult that lives in the town that's like hunting witches. And so she's like basically having to combat against that. So in Dr. Friday, these two stories are kind of interconnected with the supernatural elements that exist in both communities. And eventually these characters will have to like cross over and then work together to ultimately unite humanity. That's kind of what I want at the end of the day. And I'm focusing a lot on adolescence specifically, because adolescence is kind of like a coming of age story. Adolescents are kind of the future, like they're the people that can change the world ultimately. Through each generation, we get better and better. And by planting ideas and stuff in adolescents' brain, like by showing them art, telling them like, yes, this can be your future, like of actually working together, I think could be a powerful thing. So that's why I want it to be characters that people can relate to, essentially. Oh, I was the writer and director, and I produced a little bit.
I was the executive producer and composer, original score.
That's an interesting one. I think you're probably the second composer I've ever interviewed here in 4 years.
Cool, man. Yeah, we need more of them.
That's very
Yeah, gotta keep it going.
Producer and composer. I want to skip a little bit. Tell me a little bit about composing for this one.
Well, Nate and I have been a long time collaborator. We've been collaborators for years, so we kind of developed this language where as soon as he sends me a script, I'm already thinking of ideas. And we actually start working on the music before he even starts shooting. So before he even sets foot, even before casting, he'll just start talking to me about character and story. We really focus on that. And so I'll go sketch a few things out, send it to him, he'll give me some references, and we'll kind of create the world, the sonic world of the story first. And he'll even use some of that on set, and I've seen it on, I think Nirvana was in your other projects, where he'd play the music for some of the actors so they could kind of feel the vibe and kind of get in the character and feel like, okay, this is the kind of story we're going to be in. So we get started really early. I think music's one of the first things we start with after he finalizes the script, or even in early revisions of the script.
Yeah.
We'll just start talking about the world and how important music is, and sound itself, the sound of the film, and the music style, and kind of building a palette, of sounds. So we kind of already build like the world and how it's going to sound and how it's going to feel, with texture and everything. And then we start moving forward. And as he gets closer to shooting, I'm getting closer to syncing things up and tightening them up. So then once we have picture lock, we're almost 60-70% of the way there. So it's a different type of process, but there's a few guys that work that way. I know Christopher Nolan and Hans Zimmer work very similarly. I think Inception and even, Interstellar, the theme was written before they even shot. He was just telling Hans to like play a few things and tell him about his like son or daughter. But yeah, we start really early on, and we're very specific. Nate's very specific with how he hears his movie, how he hears his films. And so I'll show him some sketches, and they'll be long, short sketches, and some make the cut, some don't, but that's part of the process of just getting to that point where we're both hearing the same film at the same time. And then I'll show him a sketch, and I'm basically like, do you hear your movie in the sketch, And he may say, okay, that may not work for this character, but that's totally the theme for this scene or this type of element. And his references and his descriptions make my job so much easier, because his notes are insane. But I tell him, I was like, the more the better, man, because I can get more into your head. Before I even hit a note, it's all dialogue, psychology, and just shooting the shit about our favorite films, our favorite scores and soundtracks, and just characters and story. And at the end of the day, it's story. We both serve the story. Of course, it's his characters, it's his world, his vision, but we're both, fighting that same battle. So yeah, that's basically how we've been working since day one, pretty much. The day I met him, he was already like, all right, I want you to score my movie. And I think we were having coffee at Starbucks, and he was just like talking about Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross and The Social Network and some John Carpenter stuff. And I was like, okay, we're best friends, dude. We're we're gonna be all right. And I was like, what, 4 years ago or 4 years ago, we started working on our first project together. So yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the whole
Yeah, and once you find a good fit, that's why these directors and composers have these long relationships, because you develop this kind of, dialogue where he doesn't even have to tell me anything, and I just look at him listening to some of the stuff I make. I'm like, okay, I already know where he's going with his notes. And then we'll work long distance too, because he's been in LA for a while and I've been in Atlanta. So we've each gone back and forth, but we'll work long distance, send each other notes and references. And we worked on Dr. Friday specifically while he was in LA and I was in Atlanta.
That was a very, very interesting process. Yeah, we, the way that we like to work together, like in terms of just music and stuff, it's a little bit easier distance-wise. But my editor was in LA, and then my colorist was in LA as well. And a lot of what we were doing was like kind of just Google Drive like sharing and stuff, like a bunch of files. And we've gotten in this flow though where, me, him, and the editor, we've worked together on 2 projects so far. And so a lot of it was like, okay, I would send Steven this cut. And I would pretty much send Steven every cut that I had, because I always wanted feedback on that, because at the end of the day, it was just like, the first couple cuts are obviously like really, really rough, and we have to like really chew through those. But it was a little bit easier than I thought, because the last thing that we did was like the web series where like post-production was kind of chaos. Like we had episode 1 getting edited, episode 2 getting like edited simultaneously, episode 3 was like, we got to figure that out, like stuff like that. So this, just having like a short film, like one thing to kind of like focus on, we were able to like each go kind of like put in all this input back and forth and communicate via email, phone calls, whatever it was that we needed to do. So it helped. It wasn't like as much of like, worrying about like 5 different movies or something. Stuff like that.
The 3-hour time difference is probably the only challenge.
Yeah, that was the challenge.
I'm like texting him, it's like 10 a.m. for me, and he's like barely getting up 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Or it's like 3 a.m. my time, 12 a.m., but we made it work.
Yeah. It was exactly, right. Like the next day I remember just like, as soon as we like got it up on Thea, we were just like, because we ended up exporting it to Thea, which is a network that allows like Atlanta filmmakers, Georgia filmmakers to put content on there, kind of like a Netflix for Georgia. I would say, yeah. So it's basically he's got a channel on there, Bard Owl Productions, and they like Bard Owl has like we have a specific like genre of like the type of content that we put out, but you know, there's also other different channels that you can look at. So yeah, like if you like sci-fi stuff, you can go to like Bard Owl. If you like dramas, there's like channels for that, stuff like that. And it's actually a really, really cool network. And it's honestly, I think it's the future of Georgia filmmaking in general, especially because we have such great talent out here. And the fact that there is a platform that is just as beautiful as Netflix and it's free. You can watch short films on there, behind the scenes videos, documentaries, stuff like that. The next thing that I want to do is either going to be like a web series or I see it as like a show, period. The future though that I see where my content kind of going on is actually online. Because I think like for instance Thea, like the ability to be able to make a digital series and put that online now I think is like short form content, even just like web series or like TV shows, like it's all going online. Not too much stuff now, at least that I watch, is like on actual television. So like I want to kind of get in on like the whole like social media like aspects of it and like actually putting my content on the web for people to see. Because a lot of my stuff deals with kind of episodic content, and I want to be able to like make series and stuff. And so I see like the next thing that I do going like being an online series, which is actually this like sci-fi fantasy story that we were talking about a little bit earlier, called Kids versus Aliens. And I just like, I love aliens, I love sci-fi stuff, so like this is gonna sound really nerdy, but like, hey, right, I'm just gonna spill it all out. It follows this teenage girl who actually like really like early teens, when, you know, like you're in the age of like playing Xbox, like 360 gaming and stuff. She gets trapped in this world of this like virtual reality video game. She doesn't know she is though. So she's stuck in this like purgatory state where she's actually in this world and she believes that it's her own. And what I'm going to be playing a lot with is the look of the world to make it feel like it's kind of a mix between a video game and reality. So it's like something that's like so high powered in the future that it's like your reality can actually be distorted into thinking like this is your reality, which I kind of see VR sort of heading towards. I mean, right now we're in a very primitive state of VR where, you know, you can still like experience the world, but there's still some bugs with it and stuff. But I think that we're definitely headed in like that kind of direction. So I kind of want to take this like fantasy adventure story, put this like character in it, and see how she's going to get out. And I see that like transforming into like a show because it's like, you know, there's going to be other characters in this world. There's going to be people who are taking this very, very seriously and acting as gamers when your life is kind of at stake here. If you like die in the video game, you die in real life. So it's like you want to survive as best as you can, because at the end of the day, like if your mind is like just completely like wiped out in the game, like if you feel like you died in a game world, kind of like how the Matrix is like, if you die in that, like what use is your mind after you feel like you've already died? You know, your mind kind of just goes blank. So you're either in this like permanent comatose state, like catatonic like state, like basically, you're like that's kind of the stakes of it. So, and I hope to do that as an actual web series. We'll see, obviously, you know.
Yeah, I would say Nate's ahead of his time, but he's also like ahead of his budget. So my job too is I help him try to figure out, okay, that's amazing. Let's keep that story. How can we make this? How can we turn this into, you know, something that we can actually make? And, you know, how can I help him with my experience on films, and how can we work together? And we'll shoot ideas back and forth and be like, okay, keeping the story without compromising the story, how can we creatively find, you know, those solutions to these problems within in any indie film is budget, you know? But he's already, you know, ready to make Marvel movies. You know?
Having a limited budget forces you to be more creative, because a lot of like for instance, creating a whole virtual world, like it's very, very difficult to do that on like a very small budget. So the way that I've been writing the script is that this world is like ours, and it's like, but it's kind of like this. There's something that's off about it that you can see, like there's a difference between like the game world and then like the real world. And so creating that, like, basically distinguishing the two, one has to look sort of hyper-exaggerated in some sort of way. And that could just be one little element. For instance, if somebody gets cut, they're cut with like pixels or something, which is like, you know, that's like a small little thing, but that's obviously like telling us that that's a fantasy. That's not real. Whereas like in the real world, you know, you would just see blood. So in a world like this, the landscape that she's set in is this like kind of Victorian landscape anyway. So it's this like surreal landscape. And there's like a monster involved and stuff like that. So yeah, it's the hard part about that though is actually being able to cheat, like, you know, like you're trying to, I guess, play tricks with the audience in a way. Like, I mean, with the web series that I actually did, I had to deceive the audience in a way where the magic was this like magic realism. I didn't have a budget to go full on VFX to have these kids like fighting with superpowers and stuff. I had to like create camera tricks to show different types of abilities, such as like teleportation, such as somebody levitating in the air. Like being able to do that, you don't show certain things. That's kind of like, I think that's the cool part to me about just filmmaking in general. I think it makes people just much better filmmakers in general if you're like able to, I guess, deceive like the audience in a way, not to where they feel cheated, but to where it's like, you're like, oh, I get that's what they're doing.
Yeah, it's like sleight of hand. Like a card trick could be just as impressive as you're going in the big water tank, you're doing the Houdini thing. You could do an amazing card trick on the street and blow someone away.
Yeah.
So it's that same, you know, it makes us better storytellers to have a limited budget, but have our imaginations be very expensive.
Yeah.
So it forces us to say, okay, as long as the story is there and we're immersing the audience in there, they won't even realize that, you know, we did this gag with $10 or like we borrowed something and had to, you know, cheat it. So it's all story at the end of the day, you know. But
well, the cops came by the second day. So yeah, well, we were shooting in like basically outside of the diner on Sunday night, and apparently that's like just dead hours for Burbank. It was in Burbank, California. And cops were just like kind of hanging around, and they saw like we were shooting, but we had like these lights up and everything like that. And they're like, "What are you guys doing? Like, what do you think you're doing?" Luckily, like nothing happened. They didn't like kick us out, but they were just like, "Do you guys have a permit?" And like we're like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Really?" And we're like, "Yeah." I'm just like, we're just gonna like keep going with this. And they were like, okay. They're like, all right, just don't make too much noise. And then they left, But like, obviously like that was pretty scary. The forest itself though was like really weird. The forest had like, there was one incident, and it's actually stayed with me throughout like the rest of my stories, like the jackalope thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so like, there's this one dude who like comes like driving into the forest. He's like, "Yo, did y'all see that jackalope?" And I had no idea what a jackalope was. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Oh man, you know, like it's these mythological creatures, they're like legends, but this one was real. Like I swear I saw it and they could kill you." And he was like, "So y'all better watch out." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." Like, but then like 2 weeks later, I go on this trip to like Joshua Tree, and I see like nothing but like jackalope taxidermies, and I was like, "What are these jackalope things?" Turns out it's just like this like American folklore like legend, but it kind of, the way I guess I perceive jackalopes now is it's almost like they're kind of these like rite of passage characters, like in Alice in Wonderland, how like she goes down a rabbit hole and like follows a rabbit, stuff like that. For me, a lot of it dealt with a jackalope. So like I encountered this guy and like knowing about the jackalope, and then going to Joshua Tree, and I kind of went on this like rite of passage at Joshua Tree where I was like, oh, this is like a whole weird like mystical place. California's just got weird mystical locations in general. So yeah. But you know, we also heard like strange sounds and stuff in the forest. Like we didn't know what they were, like just animal sounds or something. I don't know. Luckily though, everybody was okay. But like honestly, I have no idea what goes on in the California forest. So
I was in Atlanta the whole time they were filming. So
yeah.
I'm like, all right, good luck, man.
Right. Oh yeah. So the lead, Patrick Walker, I had actually worked with him on a web series I did a little bit of time ago back when I was like in college. And unfortunately, the web series never finished. It was actually a superhero like web series, and he was a part of that. But we always wanted to like work together again. And so he actually lives in LA now. He's on like huge TV shows. He's like on The Resident. He's on Power. He was even in Iron Fist, like the Marvel show.
Grey's Anatomy too.
Yeah, Grey's Anatomy. Like he's doing a lot, and he's from Florida, lived in Atlanta for a little bit, and then moved to LA. And now we live like down the street from each other. So I was like, I hit him up once. I was like, hey, you want to do this thing? And he was like, yeah. So we met about it. We talked about it. We were hanging out. The rest of the actors, though, I had found on a site called Breakdown Express, or like Breakdown Services. And so I was like casting through there. Besides one other person, the girl who played Jessica, who was the girl that got kidnapped, I saw her at like a mixer that I went to in LA, and I was like, you have to play this part, like immediately. And she was like, yeah, I'm down to do it. So they were all like super freaking talented. Honestly, like some of the most talented people I even know. Cause Patrick for one is somebody he brings so much truth to a character. In ways that like, it's kind of like you can give him a script, you can talk about the character with him. A lot of it is like working with him, and it's almost like you want to be in the scene with him. Because at least for me, like what we were doing a lot is, we were basically just riffing off of each other. Basically like, practicing like, okay, like who is Nick? Why is he doing this? And whenever Patrick is delivering a line, like it's down to the specific word of like why, like Nick Spade, the character, he's digging into like the history of that. Like, okay, like Nick is somebody who, he doesn't really talk a lot about his family. He's a little bit hidden about that. He's somebody who kind of hides behind the camera a lot too. Like he has a camera, he's using that. He sees the world through a specific lens. And so somebody who's kind of naturally introverted, who's trying to break out of that introverted world, there's always this inner conflict that you're going to be experiencing. So whenever he's talking to another character, such as Daisy, for instance, somebody who is a very confident character, he's got this kind of inner nervousness that he's got to start working up in the beginning of the conversation, but then it starts to flow with him a little bit more easily because now he's like, okay, now like, I feel more comfortable and like, because she's allowing me to be comfortable, whereas like she's got her own mysterious agenda of like why she's letting him be comfortable with her, because she's basically like using him to get what she wants. So there's this whole thing, and like, working with Brittany Lewis, who played Daisy, also very, very brilliant. And she's the same way. Like she wants to know everything about the character. And like, that's the cool part about it. I love that kind of stuff. I love characters and like they should be people at the end of the day. Like they should be real people. So I was lucky, I would have to say, at least like finding them, knowing them, and the fact that they were like very enthusiastic about the project, and like, in rehearsals we had a lot of fun. And like nobody got hurt in the process. Obviously there was the whole like knife thing or whatever, but but yeah, like it was a very seamless experience because of it.
Yeah, even if you don't have a crazy budget or Hollywood connections, don't let that stop you from making your story as big as it needs to be and your characters as big as they need to be, and find friends that you trust and like to hang out with and make some awesome movies together. That's really how all this started.
Oh, excellent.